Okay, streams. Surface water drainage systems. Not an entirely glorious definition of a stream. Streams are beautiful places. You probably have one that you like visiting, like fishing at, like throwing rocks in, whatever, going on a boat in. But in the end, they're drainage systems. They're glorified ditches, right? I mentioned before, when we were talking about groundwater, that we don't bother messing around with a whole bunch of terms. River, creek, brook. Could go on and on. Well, there's not too many more. But those all more or less imply size. Okay? And so we just use one collective term in earth science, stream. Okay, so any channelized body of water, regardless of size, is a stream. A couple caveats: it must flow. So the canal, not a stream. And it's not man-made. Again, the canal. Now, you guys were just talking about Starch Factory Creek. We certainly did a bit of finagling with that stream back in the Works Project days. Okay, and they built some nice stuff down there. And even nowadays we'll come in and we'll augment streams. We mean not, we didn't dig the ditch and let the water flow through it. So we're allowed to go and mess with stuff and you could still call it a stream. All right. But just it has to have originally formed itself. Now I like this picture because at first glance, possibly even second glance, and you look at it, you could imagine that you're just standing there taking a picture of a smaller sort of stream in front of you, right? But if you look really carefully, right about there, I think, a little lower, actually dead center. You see the guy in the red shirt? All right, those are really, really big rocks. This is a really, really big stream. We're just up on high on a hill taking this picture. So I always thought that was kind of cool. Streams can be all sizes. This is a nice lead in here, okay? I am never going to have you guys say a stream can flow between a rate of this and that, and a stream can be as wide as or as deep as. There's no boundaries there, okay? There's no definitions. There's no typicals. And if you spend any time near a stream, you know that you can walk 50 yards down or up, and the stream is completely different. It's narrower, or it's deeper, or it's faster, or it's slower, or whatever. So there is 0 point. And your book's going to talk about some of this stuff, and just smile and nod at it, okay? You guys are working in lab. That's great, so you know about stream flow. You kind of know what's going on behind that. If I use this lecture in some of my other classes, they don't necessarily get that option to go down and take measurements in a stream like you guys do. But we'll talk about it anyhow. So surface water drainage systems. These are naturally formed systems that basically water flows downhill, and water flows, because of that, flows to low spots. And there are low spots that lead to lower spots, and lower spots that lead to even lower spots. And so what they try to do is sort of back up and get a bird's eye view on things. And that's kind of what you're looking at here. They've recently started putting some more pictures up on, more signs up on the thruway. Used to just be when you were out approaching Massachusetts that you would see the sign for changing watersheds. All right, everything to this side of the sign drains to the Chesapeake Bay. Everything to this side of the sign drains to the Mohawk River and the Great Lakes or something like that. I forget exactly what it says. I should get a picture of it. I try, but I'm always doing 70. So it's big, large scale like that. But let's get really, really small for a minute just to make sure you get the idea. And you see how there's a ridge down the center here, and they're calling that drainage divide. All right, that's splitting up the two drainage basins. This is the exact same thing as if you were standing on the sidewalk in front of your house, okay? And all the water that falls just to the right side of your roof, excuse me, is going to do what? Guess what? It's going to flow to the right of your house. All the water that flows just to the left of that peak is going to flow to the left. It's the same idea. It's not always mountain chains that divide. Sometimes it's just a high spot. I'm going to show you a map in a minute where there's a big drainage divide cutting through Michigan. There are no mountain chains in Michigan, okay? But there is, topographically, a higher area than in some other places. So that's how it's set up. And let's actually just switch to that there. Oh, the only other thing before we leave, I just want you to see, again, how we have many streams feeding each other, and then they get to bigger and bigger and bigger stream. And that's a stream system, they sometimes refer to it as. All right, so here's your major basins, all right, and your major divides. Again, I'm not going to give you a map to fill in. I just want you to have sort of an idea of what's going on there. So this is that black line. Well, so within this basin here, we're in this taupish sort of brown area here. Right about here is that arrow pointing this way. But there is, like I said, on 90, a sign that would argue with this diagram, to say the least. Over here, guess where everything feeds into? The Mississippi, all right? And that's hard to believe, especially when you're way the heck over here. Way out west, northwest, all right? But it goes to the Mississippi, south of Ohio. You guys maybe not real familiar with the Kentucky and Tennessee and all that. All of that water, West Virginia, drains towards the Mississippi. All right, huge drainage basin. You got the Rio Grande over here. All right. This one here, fairly famous, Continental Divide, that's your Rockies. And over here, I neglected to point it out, the barrier here, this is your Appalachians, exactly. This is your Appalachians. And your Appalachians give way to the Adirondacks, the White Mountains, depending on what state you're in up here. They're all really a function of the Appalachians. I've learned over the years that you guys like to separate yourself from, we're not Appalachian. No, you're not the Appalachians, but it's the same mountain chain. They just call it a different thing. And then once you get up into Canada, things drain to the Hudson, and so on and so forth. But within this, there are so many more smaller things, and then that's really where we want you to keep your focus. So I mentioned that smaller streams feed bigger streams, so on and so forth. Those are called tributaries, all right? Tributaries. And tributaries contribute water. One of the big bummers when you guys get into lab, did you guys do the topo map lab this year? Give you a thing? Okay. So one of the big bummers on there is you find your house. Well, the biggest bummer is you can't even find your house. But you find your house, and then you're looking around for stuff that you know, and you're like, hey, where's that stream that's down at the end of my street? I've been going there for 15 years. I know it's there. Where this is da-da-da-da. Well, it's all a function of scale, okay? And that's what this is trying to show up. What you may see on a map down here on the bottom, just this simple fork, when you zoom in close enough, you know, Google Street View, I guess we could call it nowadays, you see that simple little fork is really fed by dozens and dozens more, and there's where your favorite stream probably is. So it's all a function of scale. So tributaries, and yet another vocabulary. This is just chock full of vocabulary words, okay? Please do due diligence here. A lot of vocab words. So tributaries contribute water. They add to this main stream system. They feed the trunk, as you're going to see in a moment. All right, so stream channel vocabulary. The channel is what the water's flowing through. The channel is the ditch, okay? What we're going to do now is divide that ditch into parts. You basically have three parts. Well, two parts to the channel and one that's adjacent to it. You got the beds, the banks, and the floodplains. What do you think the stream bed is? Where's that located? Is it the sides? Is it the bottom? What? The sides. All right. Stream bed is the side of the stream. Anybody else? The bottom. Side. Well, what are the banks then?
I think that's the side.
Where's the floodplains? Can we agree on that? It does overflow to. All right. So here's the thing. Part of the problem is you've been misusing the word stream banks all these years. And don't go correct your grandpas or your uncles or whoever took you fishing. All right. When you stand on the stream bank, your ankles are wet. You're in water. The banks are the sides. Okay. But we always say you're on the stream bank. You're technically on the floodplain. If your feet are dry and it's not flooding, you're on that flat area next to the stream. That's the floodplain. Okay. So the bank is the slope leading down. Now again, with Starch Factory Creek, we've whatevered that so much. You really only have that on one side for most of it. The bed is the bottom. Okay, the stream bed is the bottom, and it comes up to the sides. Now, if you've got your classic sort of U-shaped stream, even though they say streams carve V-shaped valleys, the stream itself, from our perspective, always sort of seems to be like a U. It's rounded, right? It's hard to say when the bottom ends and the sides start. But technically speaking, the stream bed is the bottom. The banks are the sides. And once it levels up where your tackle box and your beers and your lawn chair and everything is, those are the floodplains. Now, every so often, between the banks and the floodplains, you're going to see a mound. Okay? That's the levee. That's the levee. And it usually runs parallel to the stream. And what that is it's a flood deposit made by the stream. The water comes up and over, and we'll learn this a little bit here soon. The water comes up and over, and it drops whatever sediment it's been carrying right on the side of the stream. And it builds up over time, and it actually helps the stream. You know, the stream isn't thinking or anything, but it does help the stream stay in its channel when water levels get higher. So bed, banks, floodplains, levees. Oftentimes we augment the levees, right? If we go and build a town right next to the stream, things change, and that stream starts flooding a whole lot, floods the town. We get all grumpy about that. So they go and do all kinds of crazy stuff. Usually they pour a whole bunch of concrete and make it nice and tall. But sometimes they'll just build it up, and leave it grassy. But it's usually fairly obvious when man has gotten involved because it's way higher than it looks like it ought to be. But they just want to make sure they don't flood their town again. So, I forgot I put this. This is a new picture here. So we've got a nice little diagram of our channel. Stream beds down here at the bottom, your banks, nice and slopey here, just like we'd hoped. And we've got some very not obvious levees here until maybe you step down into the to the floodplain, right? And realize, it got flat here. So what they show you here is an abandoned floodplain. You guys, we live in a valley, right? You've heard that, the valley. This valley was carved by that silly little river that you see over there. And you look at it and you say, how in God's name did that carve us down this much? Okay? It did. It took a very long time. And it perhaps used to be a whole lot bigger to do what you're seeing. But that's what's implied here, is that at some point in time, streams are essentially erasers, okay? And they wear away the rock and they move it downstream. So you're going back in time when the stream was up here and it was wearing away over here. Things changed. Now the stream's over here, and now it's down here. It's going to continue to cut through in its channel, but when you carve out these floodplains, that of course only happens, during the floods. And the reason they're so flat is, and we call them a plain for a reason, okay? And they're great places to farm if you don't mind all the rocks. Chock full of nutrients, all those goodies that come up and out of the stream, but full of rocks. Anyhow, the reason they're so flat is because as that sediment comes up and washes over it, it fills in all the nooks and crannies. The water sort of acts as a smoothing agent, a planer, to borrow yet another word there, and just levels it all out. So it is flat because of that. Now, here's the thing I can't help but drive home, and I know you're going to think I'm crazy. So it's a floodplain. What happens on a floodplain? Flooding. All right. Is it pretty to be next to a river? Yeah. All right. Do we continue to build houses on rivers? Yeah. And then there's that thing called flood insurance and so on and so forth. We knowingly, willingly, whatever word you want to use, continue to build on these areas and then get bent out of shape when we get wet. And it just blows my mind. And even the insurance companies for a while, they kept putting up with it. When I was in school, probably early 90s, there was a huge Mississippi flood. I don't know what happened to make it happen, but it was just the worst ever, they say. They always say that, but worst ever. And the insurance companies paid out God knows how much money. Everybody in the entire country, rates went up because these people insisted on living in a floodplain. And that was sort of the breaking point. People rebelled and why am I paying for this idiot that lives in whatever state? I don't need da-da-da-da. And that's when they sort of changed the insurance rules on that. And it made it a lot more expensive to live there. You go back 100 years, yeah, okay, we had a lot more stuff traveling by boat. You go back to hundreds of years and you see all these towns set up on streams. Yeah, there was a great reason then. Okay, and it wasn't because it was pretty. It was fertile land, it was transportation, but we can move on beyond that now. We could go visit these places. We don't need to put up neighborhoods there. I don't often go off on people being idiots, but that's one thing. And if any of you I live next to Sequoia Creek, so I'm an idiot too. So I'm not picking on you guys, but or any of your relatives. But if you live on a floodplain, you should assume that you will flood. So, but nowadays, like I said, there's flood insurance that you've been paying into all that time. So you still will want to complain to your insurance company, even though you're the person living on the floodplain. Here's a very exaggerated example of what we were just talking about. There's your stream in the first picture on a normal day, and then one hellacious flood, apparently. I would have made a lot bigger deposits than just those tan little bars right there. But they're showing you how the levees form, okay? And then after those waters recede, the stream channel is extended just, that much more. Over time, that'll vegetate, so on and so forth. The sand is likely to stay. So, yeah, that's levee formation there. All right. So we are gonna, let's see here. We're gonna do one more slide, And then we're going to wrap up for today. This, too, is chock full of vocabulary. I can't emphasize that enough. You guys that are sort of in the PowerPoint group where the big word at the top of the slide is the vocabulary word, with these pictures, that is not the case. So we're going to start at the upper left-hand side there, where the top of the stream is. We're in the drainage basin. Just use that word again, okay? And you see a whole bunch of little streams that are feeding into bigger streams. What do we call those little streams? Anybody remember? Tributaries. Good. So we see a whole bunch of tributaries. All right. And that all goes on to feed, you see the word in the middle there, the trunk stream, or the main stream in the system. That's what a trunk stream is. So all these tributaries are feeding this trunk stream. And where that all starts, they call the headwaters. Okay? So that's up there in the top. The headwaters are where any given stream system begins. And it's not always at the top of the mountain. Sometimes it can just be, for another reason. So all these various little streams, and each one of them has a name, I'm sure, right? This is a big area. So all those streams, they feed into a bigger one. At what point does the name change? Well, that really kind of depends on the locals. Maps aren't always, as you know. Now that we're all driving around with maps on our dashboards and whatnot. Heck, sometimes they don't even mention the streams. I like it when they do. But it doesn't always match, maybe what you know the stream to be. So we're coming down out of the mountains. We come down into the, we'll call it the flatlands here. And first thing is come across, it's not even labeled and it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little bit of a braided mishmash of streams there. All right, that's called a braided stream, go figure. All right, that's where a whole bunch of streams are trying to sort themselves out. Again, you've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 streams coming in there. And then there's that bit of a waterfall, perhaps, they've got set up. They've got a cliff for us, right? So you've got that waterfall hanging down there, and it's just a mess at the bottom. So the stream takes a while to collect itself. So they call that a braided stream. Anyhow, we're back to having one stream trunk after that. And then the stream starts getting all bendy. Right? The word for those bends are meanders. You've heard that word before, I'm sure. A meander is a bend in the stream. What you're going to learn today, perhaps, is that meanders are a function of aging. All right? A young stream is straight and narrow. An old stream wanders around. And it's because of weathering and erosion. We'll see it, and we'll talk about it in our next conversation here. But what happens is the water whips around the corner, it wears away a lot faster than on the inside of that bend. So it digs out on one side, and that makes it start to bend all crazy like that. So those are meanders. We've got the floodplain already. We've heard that word before. Let's go back up a step, though, and you see the number 4 there at the bottom, in the middle, really, a little red dot in the middle. Just to the right of that, you see a stream going off to the side, and it's called a tributary. Let's pretend for a minute. Let's mentally manipulate this diagram, and let's say that goes downhill, not uphill as it looks. It can happen. And what it happens is that some of the stream breaks off and goes in another direction. All right? We call that a distributary. So you had a tributary that contributes water. And now we have part of the stream branching off, flowing in another direction. We call that a distributary. It's distributing the water somewhere else. So far we've got distributary, tributary, meander, floodplain, trunk, headwaters, drainage basin. Like 8 or 9 vocabulary words just on this one diagram. And we got 2 more to go still. All right, we're at the bottom, and we're entering a body of water, be it the ocean, be it a lake. When a stream enters a large body of water, it's the effect of hitting a wall. Even if it's something you would consider flowing, like an ocean, all right? Compared to the stream flow, it's nothing. And when flowing water stops, or is forced to stop, it can no longer carry all the sediment that it was carrying. That's what rivers do. They cut through and they move sediment, okay? So it comes down here and it hits this body of water and just, whoop, everything falls out of suspension. You get a deposit. Well, over time, that deposit gets big enough where it cuts off, it strangles off that stream. The stream backs up, finds another low spot, starts flowing there. Over time, it chokes itself off in the same way. It backs up, moves over. So we're looking at this delta here. And whether you want to start on the left and move to the right, or start at the top and move to the bottom of that delta, that's the process. It wasn't just for some odd reason back there it decided to splinter into 100 streams. One of them was the main channel, and now it's just down to a trickle. And now the other one was the main channel, and then the next one, and then the next one. It doesn't even have to go in order. It can be totally random. But over time, you get this, and delta is a triangle, okay? So you get this triangle-shaped deposit at the end of a stream called a river delta. You've heard of them. Incredibly fertile, nicer than the floodplains even. A lot more nutrients, less rocks. But they get that fan-shaped deposit. It's essentially, remember those sprinklers? Not the kind that just go back and forth, but those guys, right? It's a very, very slow, thousands of years version of that. So it just flows here, and then it flows here, and then it just moves down very, very slowly. And it grows that land out for you. Now, this is a little side note, but it's worth talking about because it is with some frequency in the news. We've been talking about the Mississippi River, and New Orleans is at the end of that, and there's a very famous delta there. And it's been there for thousands of years. The waves are also erasers. We talked about how streams cut through the rock and move sediment away. Well, the waves do that, and in many ways they're much, much more powerful than a stream. For one thing, you've got storms and stuff that can really just kick up those waves, and they just dig away unmercifully. So you always hear, if you pay attention to stuff like that down there, it happened, of course, because of the huge flood that they had after the hurricane hit down in New Orleans years ago. But you hear about how New Orleans is subsiding. All right, and this is another reason that I bring it up, because we have this vocabulary word of subsidence, and that is not at all what's going on. But they use it to mean New Orleans is sinking. Here's what's really happening. So the ocean is constantly eating away at that delta. The river is constantly bringing sediment down. Because it exists, we can assume that over the years, the river has brought down more sediment. Again, it's a huge system that feeds the Mississippi. It has brought down way more sediment than the ocean could ever wear away. Okay. However, for the last 50 to 75 years or so, we still use shipping a lot. Okay, I know you guys see so many semi-trucks out there, and trains really aren't as useful as they used to be, unfortunately, in a lot of cases. Well, they still send a lot of stuff up the Mississippi. So what they've done is put these sediment traps. The Army Corps of Engineers has put these sediment traps and the dredging and this, that, in order to, God forbid we mess up commerce, to keep those boats going through there nice and easy. What that has done is it has removed the sediment that refilled that delta up every moment of every day of every year for the last thousands and thousands of years. So you have way less sediment coming down there, and the ocean hasn't changed, except potentially it's gotten a little higher, depending on whose side of the argument you believe there. And what's happening is New Orleans is being erased, okay? But it's not because of subsidence, it's because we're filtering out the sediment that used to build New Orleans. And it's just mainly being erased now. So that's what's really going on. So again, when you hear this stuff in the news, they don't necessarily know what they're talking about, whether it's intentionally or not. Think about the science. Think about the science. As I said, it was a whole bunch of vocabulary words. You'll want to make sure that you are familiar. Oh, I forgot mouth. I forgot one myself. I knew there was another word that I got off on New Orleans. Stream mouth is where the stream ends. Okay?